Hi, welcome to today's tutorial. We're going to be talking about lighting and posing a full-length subject today. The way we're going to light our subject is we're going to use a lighting tool called a VFlat, a lighting tool that is made of two reflective surfaces. They are hinged along one side and they can be opened or closed to control the spread that the light that's lighting our subject, the spread of the light that's lighting our subject. So that you can better understand what a V-flat is, I've actually built the small ones for you to see. If a bank light or a soft box is a window you can position anywhere you want, then a V-flat is almost as if it was a doorway with light coming through it. In use, a V-flat has a light placed inside of it. It bounces off the walls of the V-flat. The light comes out and lights our subject, which would be over here. Equally true, if we're using black and white foam board for our V-flat construction, we could turn the V-flat around and have a black surface so that it would actually cut the light hitting our subject. And we could use it to shield our subject from extraneous light. The way that we can get this to turn around so easily is by the type of hinge we're going to use to join the two foam boards together. It's called a barn door hinge, and each hinge is made out of 3 pieces of gaffer tape. In this smaller version that I've made here, there are only 2 hinges because it's a smaller board made of thinner material. But when we're going to be working on this 4x8 foot V-flat, we're going to be using 3 hinges that we're going to assemble using gaffer tape. 2 of the 3 hinges are already constructed, and we're going to construct the 3rd one before your very eyes so that you can see exactly how it's done. Come along, we're about to start. We're going to be using gray gaffer tape today. Normally, if we were building a V-flat for actual use, as opposed to building this one for illustration purposes, I would prefer to use white tape. The problem is that if we were to use white tape, you wouldn't be able to see the hinge as I place it. So we're going to be using gray gaffer tape. What we're going to do is we're going to take 2 pieces of gray gaffer tape. That one of them I'm laying tape side, sticky side up, and then I'm going to take another piece of gaffer tape and I'm going to stick it to the first piece of gaffer tape. The overlap of the 2 pieces of tape is equal to the thickness of the boards we're using to create our V-flat. Now, I'm going to slide it in between our boards to where we want the hinge, and I'm going to tape down one side, and then I'm going to take the other side and I'm going to run it up along the bottom. You can't see my hand doing it, but approximately on this side, on the underside of it, I took my hand and just ran it across the tape line. We're going to take a second piece of gaffer tape that we've ripped into 2 pieces. Again, we're going to overlap them by about 1/2 inch because that's the thickness of the foam board we're using. Only this one, we're going to thread into the joint between the 2 pieces in the opposite way that we did the first hinge. Finally, we take a 3rd piece of gaffer tape that we've ripped into 2 strips. Each strip is about 7 or 8 inches long. We overlap them by about 1/2 inch. We make sure they're stuck to one another, and we slip that in between our 2 boards, and we slip it in again at the place where they overlap so there's no stickum on it. One side is pushed down on this side of the board, and the other one is pushed down on the other side of the board. What we've just done is made a hinge that can fold 360 degrees. And now that they're done, we can close the barn door, the V-flat, and you'll notice that this is what the barn door hinge looks like on the back side. Again, if I were doing this for a more permanent installation in my studio, instead of using gray tape, I might use strips of white and black tape so that the black tape is hidden against the black side and the white tape would be hidden against the white side. It's time to show you what happens when we stand this thing up. This is our finished V-flat. Looking at it from the angle you're looking at it from right now, it just looks like a plain piece of foam board. But the truth is that once we open it, we have a self-supporting piece of lighting equipment. In fact, it could never be arrested for vagrancy because it has visible means of support. We're going to bring a model into this picture, and we're going to show you what happens if you change the position of the light inside the V-flat. Right now, the light is relatively low, and if if our V-flat was emulating a doorway, it would be as if the doorway was under an awning and the light was coming in from the bottom of the doorway. In other words, the sun was hitting the floor and then bouncing up through the doorway. Let me introduce you to today's model, Sasha. This is Sasha. Ladies and gentlemen, meet Sasha. Sasha, meet the ladies and gentlemen. All right? Sasha's going to stand over here, and she's going to look at a spot on the sidewall. I want to turn your body just a little this way and just turn your face a little back to that little spot on the V-flat. The light right now that's hitting Sasha, which is this low light, is hitting the underside of her chin. It's coming up at her face, and it looks unnatural. One thing we can do to make this lighting look more natural is to make it emulate where the sun would be in the sky. By doing that, or to do that, I would raise the light up. Now look at the light on Sasha's face. Notice that the lighting no longer comes from beneath her, but instead comes from above her. And let's just take a look at it one more time. This is the low light. Notice that it's bouncing up into Sasha's eye sockets, under her nose, under her chin, right? And when we raise the light up, the entire lighting becomes more natural. That's the first thing to consider. So we can move this V-flat, the light that's shining into our V-flat, up or down. The other advantage of using a V-flat, and something else that you can control, is how wide the V is open. Look at the light on the back wall. If we wanted the back wall to go darker, we could move this wall of the V-flat inward. Watch the back wall as I do this. Now it just got darker. Now I opened up the V and it got brighter. So that's a second control that we have when we're using a V-flat. Let's say that we liked this picture, but we felt that the shadow side of Sasha's face was too dark. The shadows were too deep. We could bounce a light off the ceiling of the studio, and I will show you what happens when we do that. Kelly, could you hit the bounce light? See what happens to the shadow side of Sasha's face? Kelly, turn off the bounce light. Kelly, turn the light back on. So what we're doing with that second light bouncing off of the ceiling of the studio is we are opening and either darkening or lightening the shadows on the shadow side of her face. Kelly, turn off the bounce light. So what we talked about here, just as a quick recap, is we can start off with if the light is low, it looks very unnatural and comes up from beneath her face. If we raise the light, it becomes much more natural. We can change the angle of the V, and by doing that, we can darken or lighten the background. And the last thing that we can do after we've decided on how dark we want the background and how high we want the light is we can decide to add a fill light to the other side of Sasha's face. Cal, flip that light on. Thank you. I've just shown you 4 different possibilities of ways you can use a V-flat. What you really want to do is you want to think about each one of them and choose and pick the ones you want so you can express your own creativity. We'll show you something else in a second. Maybe you think that the light coming through the V-flat with the light pointed into the V-flat is not contrasty enough. Maybe you want it to have more snap. Maybe instead of adding a fill light to the far side of Sasha's face, bouncing off the ceiling of the studio, maybe what you really would want is you'd want those shadows to go inky black. Well, there's a way you can do that using a V-flat also. You could take this light and bury it into the V and then turn it so it's aimed outside of the V. Now when we do this, some of the light bounces off the sides of the V and fills in the shadows created by the light in the central area. But let's say that you wanted something that was not this contrasty, but not as soft as the light aimed into the V. One way to accomplish that is to drop a sheet of set shop Tuflux, which is a polyester diffusion film, to the front side of our V-flat and hold it in place with a thing called T-pins. What we have now is a direct light coming out of this V-flat. It's certainly much harder than the light that we had when the light was bouncing into the V-flat. We're going to invite Sasha back onto our set. We're going to lower the sheet of set shop Tuflux as a diffusion screen in front of the light, and we'll see the effect that we're going to create. Sasha, will you join us? Just turn this way. Sasha's going to look at the little spot where she was looking before, and my assistant and I are going to lower the sheet of Tough Setlux. That's about perfect. Thanks, Kel. What we've just created is a wall of light. It's actually more contrasty than the light we had when the light bounced into the V-flat, because now it's a direct light coming out of the V-flat, and by putting this diffusion screen in front of it, we've created a wall of light that approximates, emulates the same lighting that you would get from a softbox. It's a really beautiful light, and it has a little more snap than the light we previously used. Light is a form of energy. If you don't believe me, just ask any scientist. For this particular photograph, what I decided to do was to accentuate the energy coming from the light by using a wind machine that I rented from the set shop. In addition to the wind machine from the set shop, I found a diaphanous scarf, very flimsy, lightweight material that Sasha is going to be holding behind her head. Flip it over your shoulder, Sasha. All we want you to do is just watch the action that we get. What I'm going to be showing you now are a couple of simple things you can do to improve the look of anybody when you're doing a full-length picture of them. It's all well and good when you're photographing a professional model who spent time in front of a mirror and they know what makes them look good. But what happens when you have to photograph an average person? There are a couple of things that I can suggest that'll improve the look of almost any subject when you're shooting a full-length picture of them. Sasha is going to join us. Hi, Sash. Okay. First thing that we want to talk about is, let's say Sasha is standing here and I'm standing here and our feet are together and our hands are by our sides. Well, Sasha's shoulders and hips are wider than the 2 feet. And that has a feeling as if Sasha is like one of those dolls that's about to tip over to the left or the right. There's no feeling of like a strong base that gives you a sense of security about her pose. But if I ask Sasha to move her right foot out a little bit to the side, all of a sudden her base is widened. And when her base widens, all of a sudden she looks more secure and more comfortable, and you don't get this feeling of tension that the subject is going to tilt over. The second thing to consider is that most subjects, right, if they stand with their hands at their sides and their elbows close to their body, when people look at that photograph, they see them as wide as their elbows. One way to make a subject look thinner is to get their elbows off the sides. There are a few ways to do this. One of them would be, Sasha, put your hands on your hips. When a person puts their hands on their hips, all of a sudden you can see that they're cut here. And you can see that they're cut on the other side. And that means that they have an hourglass figure, and in general it looks more attractive. I can absolutely guarantee you that if you can make any subject look thinner, for 99.78% of the time, they're going to be happy with what you've done for them. The last thing that I want to talk about is my belly. And I'm mentioning this because if I face you straight on, you can't see that my stomach sticks out. But if I turn my body sideways, all of a sudden, the belly, all of a sudden my stomach becomes part of my profile. So the idea is that if you can contain this bulge within the sides of the body, then the person looks thinner. It'll make all your subjects happier. A while ago, when photographers wanted an accurate rendition of how a subject looked, the important point was that they had to get the imaging plane of the camera, be it a digital chip or a piece of film, parallel to the subject. When they did that, then the subject looked accurate. One part of the subject wasn't bigger than the other, nothing was distorted. It was considered an accurate rendition. If you want to think about it though, to get an accurate rendition of a subject, to get the camera imaging plane parallel to the subject and to have the subject centered in the imaging plane, the camera lens had to be at approximately belly button height of the subject. So belly button height was considered an accurate rendition, and if a photographer went very, very high for a camera angle or very, very low for a camera angle, well, that was considered a distorted image, and it was considered a faux pas. I thought about this for a long time, and I actually felt for a very long time that I was interested in creating an accurate rendition of my subjects, and I would always shoot my full-length pictures of people from belly button height. But then I started to look at some of the magazines and tabloids on supermarket checkout counters. And I realized that if a movie star was the subject of a photograph, the important point about that picture was not necessarily the movie star's shoes, but more importantly, it was their face, or their faces if it was a couple. So when a photographer photographed a movie star for a cover or an inside spread in a tabloid, if they went to a high camera angle and the subject's head, because it was now closer to the camera, looked bigger than the subject's feet, what was once a faux pas actually made the picture easier to sell and made the picture more effective. So the important point here is that you have to decide what your subject is. If Sasha and I were movie stars and you wanted to put us on the cover of the Inquirer, then it might be a smart idea to shoot us from high above, because you don't really care about our feet and our shoes. You care about our faces and you want to accentuate them as much as possible. So it depends on what your subject is, on what camera angle you choose. If we were movie stars, you might want to go to a high camera angle so that our faces become more accentuated and more easily recognizable. And if we were wearing clothes that you wanted to accentuate for an ad or for a catalog of men's or women's clothing, well then you might be better off going for a belly button height picture where the camera back was parallel to the subject. So it's really important when you're choosing a camera angle to not only consider who and what the subjects are, but what's the purpose of the picture? What is the picture going to be used for? Because once you decide that, you can accentuate the part of the subject that's most important to making that picture a success. That's the end of our tutorial for the day, and Sasha and I say bye.